Hey everyone, welcome to my friend's little shed. You probably ask yourself, what are we doing here? Well, the nice people from Sinis approached me after seeing this guy and they were like, yeah, this is the guy we want to review our new laser cutter, the Ortur Laser Master 3. Well, alright! However, since I reside in a very cute small apartment, I don't really have space for cool stuff like that. Hence, we're in the backyard of my friend who generously allowed me to use his shed to set up the laser cutter. What are we going to do in this video, you ask me? Well, I can tell you one thing, it's not gonna be a review since I have zero experience with laser cutters. But I do have a background in industrial design and I can draw. So I can think of a couple of really fun projects that we could make with this Laser Master 3. Hopefully this will demonstrate what this little machine is capable of, and some people will see if they want to get one or not. So let's get started. And what better way to get started than the unpacking and assembly process of the Laser Master 3. In the lines of the high professionalism my channel is known for, we proceeded to unbox the laser cutter right there on the floor. Well, to be fair, I was the one starting on the floor. My friend asked me to please at least use the table, so I caved to the peer pressure and moved the parts to the table. Once we had all the pieces on the table and we had clearly no space to assemble it, it was time to return to the real estate I scouted on the floor and proceed with assembling it there. Both my friend and I have master's degrees in engineering, so of course we couldn't follow simple instructions on a piece of paper, and we were mucking about for a long time before my friend's son had to step in and help us out. The assembly itself is actually pretty clear and simple. If you pay attention to the instructions, we could have been done within 10 minutes or less. But with our infinite wisdom, it took us about an hour till we had everything set up and working. Once again, not the machine's fault, purely our ineptitude. You have plenty of YouTube video tutorials aside from the instructions that come along with the laser cutter, or actually can be found on the company's websites as well. So you should have no issues assembling it. And now that it's finally assembled, let's move it out to the shed. As you can see, we found a cozy little spot for it here in the corner. What we have here is a pretty sleek little machine. I mean, I don't have much comparison since I never really used any other laser engravers or cutters, but just from an industrial designer's point of view, I love the chamfers, I love the nice matte finish, and it's simple and to the point, and as industrial designers like to say, form follows function, and this little thing really does that when it comes to aesthetics. So what are the main things of a laser engraver? Of course, we have the charging cable, then we have a cable to connect with a computer. We also have a Wi-Fi, so you can connect with your phone with an app. Then we have a power button, which only functions if the key is turned on. We don't want our friend's little kid lasering down the whole house. And finally, we have an emergency stop, which is great because I love big red buttons. This is the laser head itself, and we have this really practical little distance adjuster, which is actually for the focus, so we can make sure that the head is at the right distance from what it's actually lasering. So we can just turn this knob, push this back up here, and now I'm sure that the laser is nicely focused. And then we have these fancy protective glasses, which you should be always wearing when the laser is on. Now we also have other tidbits, like then you have some things that we just didn't use, like there's an air intake here if you have an air compressor for cooling. Then you have a rotary motor switch here that we didn't really use either. There is an app which you could use to control the device, but since I have my own drawings that I want to work on and I want to make sure to adjust them correctly, we just went with Lightburn, which there's tons of tutorials and actually it's really easy to learn and use. But I think it's time to get started with the projects. As you can hear, it does make quite a bit of noise, but that is why it's good to be in the shed, and as I said, always wear the glasses. We started out with a test piece from Make or Break shop. I downloaded this and it was actually quite useful. I did not realize that we're supposed to be cutting here. Something that I learned, MDF is great for engraving. It looks really nice. Look at this. But it can't really cut through it, so we're really struggling with cutting through it. Smaller holes like this one here, we managed to cut, but if we look at this, as you can see, it just made it really dirty instead of making it nice. But since I'm here, I hope you can see this. Look at the quality of this, and I'm going to show some zoom-ins and photos as well. This looks really fantastic. So for engraving on MDF, if you cut it out yourself, it looks absolutely fantastic. You can see my face there as well. Very happy about being engraved in this MDF. Another thing, you get like really nice and crisp and dark images as well. Sometimes a bit too dark. That is why we reprinted it. Like this was the problem was with the printing the image itself, so I drew that too dark. But this just, you have to admit, this looks fantastic. I really like it. And to talk about the engraving process itself, it can take a bit of time, but as you have and will see, the end result is really worth it. On average, an image of the size you see being worked on now takes about 30 minutes, plus minus of course. You can set the speed and strength of the laser. The faster it goes, the lighter the engraving is, and of course the weaker you set the laser, the lighter the engraving will be again. We set these to be around 2000 millimeters per minute at around 80% laser strength. The machine can do 20,000 millimeters per minute and the strength of the laser is 10 watts. But these are all numbers you don't really know or care about if you are not familiar with lasers. The point is that there is plenty of room for experimentation and finding the options that are best for you. Just so you have a feel for it, let me run the footage a bit in real time. So yeah. Takes a bit of time, but once again, it's definitely worth it. The only thing is you will have to cut out the MDF plates by yourself. Now, moving over to plywood, that is easy to cut and also easy to engrave. I did a Steve the Pigeon drawing specifically to be engraved with harsh blacks to see how the machine would do, and of course it did not disappoint. The only thing with plywood is the texture in the wood itself. This is another engraving, and this time we also laser cut it out just so you have a feeling for it in the light. As you can see, it is quite nice. You have, I don't think the camera picks it up, but you have a really nice transition of grays. Here you have darks. The only problem is with this kind of plywood, you have a lot of seams from the wood, and that makes the visual look a bit awkward. Actually, my girlfriend prefers it like this. I'm not quite sure about it, but you can see the quality is really good. And now let's take a moment and take a look at all these awesome engravings. I really like these. And of course, this channel wouldn't be this channel if I didn't try to design some sort of robot or mech. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to design a robot in Gravity Sketch, put it into Fusion 360, adjust it, make it so that I can cut it out with the laser cutter and see if we can assemble it. So let's get started. To be fair, I did not start out with Gravity Sketch. First, I did a couple of sketches to see what sort of robot I want, but I quickly realized that I would be more efficient designing it if I could have actually volumes that I can rotate around. It's one thing to draw a cool mech on paper where you don't need actual functionality, but when you have to make sure the pieces will actually fit, it is better to have volumes to play around with.
And for me, Gravity Sketch is the best playground for that, since its workflow is the closest to my intuitive sketching process. Once I was done with the rough idea model, I exported the shape and switched to Fusion 360. That's where the actual thinking process started. While I didn't want to overcomplicate my life for my first project, I still wanted to create a cool mech, and in the end, I feel I did veer a bit more towards the overcomplication. I had to keep in mind the thickness of the plywood we are going to use, which was 3 millimeters. I had to make sure that everything fits nicely together, that the angles are correct, and that it's assemblable. Assemblable, if that's a word. In the end, I had between 40 or 50 components, not including the 16 wooden pins I was using to represent some of the joints. And then I had to take apart the assembled mech and align all the joints so I can create a drawing out of them that I can export and send to Lightburn for the actual cutting part. And with that, I sent the files over to my friend who started the cutting process. This was actually the smoothest part of this whole operation, since the laser cut through the 4mm plywood like through butter. And yeah, you heard correctly, the plywood was actually 4mm and not 3. Thankfully, that wasn't a huge issue. I only had to sand down one of the interlocking mechanisms so it fits, and the rest went quite easily. Assembly of the mech was pretty smooth as well. While most of the pieces fit together satisfyingly, I still added some glue to them just to be sure. I must say this did feel a bit like building with Lego or putting together a Gundam kit. The best part was that it was designed by me. And while I panicked every now and then that I miscalculated some of the angles, in the end everything came together quite well. And once all the glue dried, I must say I was quite proud of my little creation. But with this done, for now, it is time to move on to the next project.
Yeah, let's not move on just now because I wanted to show you the robot and what it looks like assembled like this. So aside from a close-up, I also wanted to show you one more thing. You can see these smears here on the side, and these happen from having a metal plate under the plywood that we're cutting out, and from the charring it gets a bit schmutzy and also moist, and as we pick it up and you move it, this can happen, so you have to watch out for that. We were already paying much more attention with the next robot. There's going to be another one, but yeah, this is just something that we learned. We didn't know we were starters. There's probably a better solution. We already bought a mesh, like sort of a mesh thing that goes under the wood instead of a metal plate, so that should solve this problem for the next cut. So it's not so bad, you can still paint over it, but it's just something to keep in mind if you ever get started and you are a beginner like me. Anyways, this is my big bulky robot and I really like him. He actually reminds me of Tankor from Beast Machines, if you are familiar with that series. So here's the thing, after many years of drawing on a very clunky Cintiq holder, namely this thing that I had to attach every single time with these screws and then unattach if I wanted to just draw traditionally, I have decided to finally upgrade and got myself a nice monitor arm. Now I had one concern, which sadly came through, is if I draw on this and I push a little bit too hard, it will pivot backwards. What does this mean? Project time. Since I have the new laser cutter, I thought I'll design something that I can hook in here and that will push against this one. So when I draw and push against it, this will nicely stay in place here. So perfect opportunity to use the laser cutter. So this project was quite fun to make because I went through several iterations trying to create a minimal surface area for the monitor stopper. As you can see, the first iteration is quite a bit bigger than my second one, which we ended up cutting out in the end. I even tried to make a third version, which was a little bit more complicated with a mechanism where I could adjust the size here, how close it is to the monitor holder, but I decided it's a bit too complicated for a first project.
Sadly, my friend was a bit too enthusiastic and he immediately started cutting this as soon as I sent it to him, so there is no footage of it. So instead, we jump straight to the finished product. And as you can see, my friend did some improvement on the design by engraving my face on it. And I must say, I agree with this decision. Putting my face onto anything makes the product immediately better. But all joking aside, I am actually surprised how sturdy this is, because plywood in itself is quite flimsy. I wouldn't trust it too much, but put it together like this, and I already have tested it. I've been using it for quite a while now. This is very strong and sturdy put together like this. And I usually do not quite, but I do woodworking stuff around the house every now and then, having to make something to help out here or there. And the sewing and the sawdust, it's not that much fun. This makes my life so much easier, being able to model it out to 3D, just sending it to the laser cutter and then just assembling it. It's really an improvement, I can tell you that. And while it has some of the same schmears that we had with the Mac before, it is nicely hidden here behind the computer, and it's doing its work and people are not seeing it. Look at it. Look me pushing on it. Isn't that nice? And then let's do a quick improvement on my Mac design as well. While I really like the first version of my Mac, I wanted to make a simpler version that can be assembled straight out of the box, as one would say. I didn't want to use extra pieces like the wooden pins from before. So once again, I jumped back into Gravity Sketch to create a new concept. I had more of an idea of what the outcome might be now after my first Mac, so I was more comfortable and had a better direction for this second one. I also was more brave with the model in Fusion 360. I made the shapes more interesting and decided to add some areas to the surface that are cut out, thus sneaking in some detail into the design. Once again, I did mess up the thickness of the pieces because I was designing for a 3mm thickness this time around. Meanwhile, the plywood that I bought was not 3 but 3.6mm. The thickness issue wasn't such a big deal in the end. Yeah, the pieces were a bit loose and not sticking, but once we applied a bit of glue to the pieces, they stuck together perfectly and we ended up with quite a nice, robust little robot. Once again, this felt like building a fun little robot kit, and it just reminded me of being a kid again and building something together with your friend. And here is our robot in person. Let me bring him a little bit closer so you can see him. I think I actually like the brute robustness of the first Mac a little bit more, but I love the level of detail and the simplicity of building this one quite a bit more. So I'm definitely going to think how I can improve this and maybe bring that robustness from the previous Mac into this one for future iteration. For now, if you would like to build this Mac for yourself, there will be a link to my Gumroad in the description down below where you can download it, and if you are a Patreon subscriber, depending on your tier, you can get it with 50% off or for free. So take a look if you're interested. So these are some of the things that you can do with the Ortur Laser Master 3, and keep in mind this is just wood because I really like working with wood, but you can also try it with plexi, aluminium, you can engrave, I saw even on stone. So I'm gonna give it a lot more testing later on, but this is what I wanted to mainly do. At this point I also want to give a big shout out to my buddy who allowed me to use his lovely little base for this test. There he is, that's my buddy right over there. And here are my Mac's monitor stopper and also one more small engraving that I did. And if you do want to get an Ortur Laser Master 3, there is a link in the description and also a discount code that will give you $105 off, and yours truly will also get a small commission from each transaction. So thanks again to Sinis for sending me this machine, and also big thanks to my patrons who helped me dig a little bit deeper into my pocket so I could buy a lot of wood, because we were wasting a lot of wood because we didn't know what we were doing for a while. I hope you had as much fun watching this video as I had making it, even though it wasn't necessarily a drawing video. I was happy to let my creative juices flowing and also satisfying that inner industrial designer a little bit. But as always, the most important thing is that you folks have a great time and see you in the next video. Bye bye.